G'day legends, happy Monday, and I hope that you had a fantastic weekend, and however you chose to spend it, that you had a great time. And I tell you, I have a curse of being offline. Every time I'm away and I'm unable to make a video, whether I'm flying, I'm injured, or I'm at an event, all hell breaks loose around the world. And I think for the good of humanity, I need to just stay here at home in my office for good. But like I said, I first hope you had a fantastic weekend. We've got a lot to go over today because I have missed 3 full days. Now, on the weekend, I was the best man at a wedding. It was an absolute privilege, and it was an amazing day. So congratulations to Mark and Amy for having such a beautiful, perfect day, and me being part of it was such an honor. And I will say my speech absolutely killed. But today we have a lot to go over. We've had major missile attacks both into occupied territories and from Russia into Ukraine as well. But where we have to, and we'll look at the maps, but where we have to start, and I'm just going to speak on this for a bit, I'm not going to show anything, it's been publicized everywhere, is the vicious, murderous attacks that happened against civilians in Moscow who are just attending a concert. Now, today the count that I can find is that 137 people have been murdered by these brutal, calculated killers. And I'm not going to go over the specifics or a rundown of events in this. It's been rehashed a million times by media, by bloggers, by everyone. But I just want to touch on a few pieces, and primarily how the informational sphere took the news and how they're using the news and maybe where outcomes will go. But all of the informational sphere did seek to capitalize on this horrible event to further their own propaganda narratives and agendas. Now, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, or IS, all of their effective propaganda, it needs not to lie, but to make good use of the lie and to tell truth in the appropriate form. And all of these have their own propagandas, their own informational centers, their own narratives that they want to push. Now, where I want to start is I will say I think Ukrainian pages, bloggers, some officials took this in an absolutely disgusting way. From memes, the amount of laugh reacts, the blatant dehumanization of what happened, all being explained away in what about-ism. And when it comes with civilians, there's not this. Just because something horrible happened here doesn't mean something horrible is rightful over here. It was horrible. The way the reaction from these pages was horrible. And what we did see as well were official remarks straight away leading to blame Putin directly, and that it was an inside job, with some bloggers even speculating that they were using blank rounds. Now, those who have shot weapons like this have no idea what they're on about saying that. Now, I read a comment which summed up what I'm saying about seeing this, and I think there's a mood among people growing of this. And the comment said, it's statements like this that are rapidly accelerating my lack of support for Ukraine. I've spoken before that I think these propaganda channels, your NAFO types, is actually having a ineffective propaganda campaign at this point in the war, when it just seems to be aimed at dehumanization and at misinformation a lot of times. And I think people are starting to see through some of that, even if they support the cause here. When you see this attack happen and memes and laugh reacts, people go, what are we actually supporting? Now, let's talk about this more an official information spheres, not just the unofficial sphere of media that has become. But I think Zelensky and the popular pages and the official pages actually handled this in the worst way possible. I think there was a huge opportunity to gain support from civilians inside Russia, but also from around the world. And I think it was missed. To extend support to civilians while also defending yourself from the claims made from the Kremlin that you're not at war with the civilians there attending a concert. You're at war with the Kremlin and the soldiers, and then your supporters of that military complex there, but not the civilians attending a concert. I think what we've seen of the crossing borders into Belgrade, into Kursk, and to try and rally up Russian civilian support, citizen support, and we know that's backed by Ukraine and probably a lot of other agencies out there. I think this was an opportunity to do that as well and say this attack, what's happened is absolutely horrific. We had nothing to do with it, but we stand with the civilians who were hurt there by these terrorists. Part of this is what we've seen. I think that opportunity was missed rather than just pointing fingers back at fingers pointing at you. Ukrainian intelligence, so the spokesman here, or Andriy Yusov, has told Ukrainian paper, this is a deliberate provocation by Putin's special services about which the internal community warned. The GUR claimed the shooting was intended to justify even tougher attacks on Ukraine and total mobilization in Russia. The public execution of people in Moscow should be understood as Putin's threat of an even greater escalation and expansion of war. Now, the Kremlin and security forces jumped very quickly to then blame Kyiv. Now, this was somewhat effective because people can see the why, but this also makes use of very effective narratives to further the war and unite the Russian population. Now, for those who think that this will divide populations, I'm sorry, but you're incorrect. Look at New York City after 9/11. Look at London after the Blitz. Look at Israel after October the 7th. Horrible tragedies like this, and like what we've just spoken about, this unites populations closer than ever. This is why people are pointing at then inside jobs. But for Russia's narrative of what happened here, it lines up with warnings that the US and the UK embassies gave for potential terror attacks within a week for public areas. We talked about this on the channel, and how quickly the US denied that Ukraine had any involvement in the shootings, as well as at the same time we had the Ukrainian-backed incursions into Russia over the past 2 weeks. This is where these narratives can be very effective. Now, Putin, you can look this up on the Kremlin's website because I know these things get misquoted a lot, and him talking about this. Now, we're not going to read all this, but regarding the investigation of this crime, the results of the operational search action, we can currently say the following. All four perpetrators who are directly involved in the terrorist attack and all those who shot and killed people have been found and apprehended, saying they attempted to escape and were heading towards Ukraine, where, according to preliminary information, a window was prepared for them on the Ukrainian side to cross into the state border. Now, this will be heavily questioned and looked at because some of this doesn't line up with other bits of information, but getting real information is very difficult at the time. I'm just saying what he has said. The investigative and law enforcement agencies will spare no effort to establish all the details of this crime. However, it is already clear that we are confronted not simply with a carefully and cynically planned terrorist attack, but a premeditated and organised mass murder of peaceful, defenceless people. All perpetrators, organisers and masterminds of this crime will face fair and inevitable punishment, whoever they may be and whoever directed them. I emphasise once more, we will identify and bring to justice each and every individual who stands behind these terrorists, those who orchestrated this atrocity, this assault against Russia and our people. So that is what then Putin has said. You can see where these narratives are, and only today we've seen then this photograph come out here of a FAB glide bomb underneath a Russian aircraft that says for Crocus City Hall on it. So you can see the effect that this has everywhere. Now, IS has claimed responsibility for these attacks, but with terror organisations, you need to be very careful because they'll claim your lunch if they could. They'll do nothing, claim it, and take it on board as their own. But it does seem their official channels and other people have said that this is what it is. But we've also seen this picked up on Russia propaganda because we have seen a number of IS patches popping up in Ukrainian footage on the arms of Ukrainian soldiers. Now, the men who've been killed and arrested who committed this horrible crime are confirmed to be Tajiks working for IS. But much more beyond that, we don't really know. Will we ever know? Probably not, as far as the full truth. And it does seem funny, though, working for IS, being captured and not having, I guess, a final stand to be martyred. So that does seem to stand out of line with attacks carried out by this group prior. Now, the burning question here is who funded this, who ordered this, who is behind these people just because they're the face of it. Now, if you don't think that certain agencies from different countries around the world haven't ordered and planned hits on civilians or directly started groups for the purpose of propaganda or justification of actions, well, you and I are not going to get along over a pint of beer. But this attack is horrible. Who's behind it? We don't yet know. We can only, I guess, speculate. But of course, the capitalization on narratives, on propaganda of this was instant off the bat with everything that sort of fell into place that happened here. And it's just bloody horrible what has happened everywhere. Now, what we're going to do now is talk about some big things that have changed over the past, say, 48 to 72 hours since I've been away. Now, the first bit we need to talk about is from Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov. We're in a state of war. Yes, it started out as a special military operation, but as soon as this group was formed, when the collective West became a participant in this on the side of Ukraine, it became a war for us. I'm convinced of that, and everyone should understand this for their internal motivation. So we have seen a change in a lot of actions over the past week. We have seen more success on the front line, more large missile attacks, and we're going to speak about this. Missile attacks both ways. But this is the first time that we've seen this state of war rather than a special military operation spoken about. Now, how will things change into the future? We are unsure. But let's then have a look at these attacks straight off the bat. Now, we're going to go back a couple of days. So what have we seen? Well, we've seen a huge wave of missiles, not the largest one ever, but huge waves into Ukraine, striking many targets. All of Ukraine had all the air raid sirens on. Now, we can see here a KH-101 firing its deterrence flares off here before then hitting the hydroelectric dam in Zap. So this is something we've seen more and more develop through, are things like these flares off the missile, which are seeming to work. Here you can see it coming in and a hit on target. And there was many hits on target. And that is something that we want to speak about. Now, why do I think that we're seeing more and more of this? Now, excuse my laziness, but I'm going to just speak about what I put on in the Telegram if you'd like to join. With Ukraine having an issue with air defense supply and Russia finding a lot of success using fabs and how quickly they can then make them. So we see this on the same day. This was released by Ukrainian page. The Russians announced an increase in production of Fab 500, Fab 1500, and the launch of mass production of Fab 3000s in early Feb 2024. So this is getting published more and more around. This was on the 21st of March. So mass making, mass producing them because they're effective in the front line. And I said the Russians are taking advantage of this situation to not only target Ukraine's air defense, but also draw down missile supplies and to force them to move batteries to protect critical infrastructure so the Russians can have more freedom of air movement on the front for the fabs. So what I see is Russia say, look, we want to use these cheap and effective fabs right in the front line here, but if we target things in Zap, in Dnipro, in Kyiv, in Lviv, Ukraine have a finite amount of air defense. They have to move it to these areas of infrastructure so it'll be off the front line so then we can use the cheaper fabs. And I think that is what we're seeing, as well as air defense is very, very expensive. When you know Ukraine has a huge ammunition shortage, especially with everything hung up in the States at the moment. So I think there's a huge capitalization on what is happening with that whole situation. Now, we then had this released. Now, we're going to talk about this. This was then 2 nights ago, what Ukraine has said that they did shoot down. Now, typically Ukraine just says they shoot down 100% of whatever was fired, and we can't either confirm or deny that because it is illegal to take any footage of both the aftermath and or it flying in the air of these. The SBU will rock up to your house, bang on your door. Not a great night, but we get this, 92 of the 151 Russian aerial targets. Now, this is what was then fired, and this is what was then downed. And this tells us some very, very interesting bits and pieces if we analyze what has actually happened in here. And I did it the other night, so I'm not going to do it again. These numbers are very interesting. After I got a report of 100% air defense rate the night before, of the missiles today, it shows that 42% were intercepted. So if you actually add up what is a missile, regardless of type here, only 40% were actually intercepted. Now, in this, we see that there were Kinzhal ballistic missiles. 0 of these had then been intercepted. This means, to me, the Patriots are either not in the locations hit, which they may not be exactly where they're going for, or they're very low, out of ammo from past strikes. Patriot is the only thing, as far as we know, that can actually hit one of these Kinzhal. So they're fine where they know Patriot isn't. Maybe Patriot's closer to the front line, or there is a huge shortage of missiles for a system like that. Now, also, 0 Iscanders were hit, which we've seen in the past 3 weeks. Russia have had more success with Iscanders. Now, we saw the Iscanders land near Zelensky in Odessa. We've seen the Iscanders used against HIMARS Patriot systems too. Now, there's a bit of question about exactly what those words, but we have seen Iscanders have more success, leading people to say, and I've said on this channel, has there been some change of the targeting in Iscanders? Because it does seem there is now more success than beginning. Remember, these numbers we suspect reflect a better scenario than maybe it actually is. So with any numbers, I'm always questioning whether it's casualties, whether it's amount of downed missiles, whatever. I'm always questioning exactly, it's going to reflect in the best light possible. So it may have actually been a lower percentage than this engaged, but we don't really know. And we had last night as well, then this. Overnight, Russia again attacked Ukraine with a combination of missiles and drones. 57, 43 were destroyed. 18 of these KH-101 and 555 missiles, and 25 of the 28 Shahed drones. So if we then bring this back up, we know that the targeting of Shaheeds is very effective. The KH-101 and 555s is effective as well, but you can sort of see that this is lining up to the same sort of amount. So effective, but still slipping through rather than this 100%, 100%, 100%. So it is just interesting to see where this is changing, the amount of more munitions going in. And of course, the reports that were coming out in 2022, now 2 years ago, that Russia was out of missiles and couldn't make more, and that Kinzhals, they only had 15 of, or 25 or 30 or whatever it said. And then we're seeing those used more and more. This is going to be a real problem if these rolling attacks can continue, not only for the supply of air defense into Ukraine, but the elimination of targets. That eventually air defense has to be moved around, and it's going to be very difficult. And is Russia looking to wear down that in other places, keep the air defense busy so they can then use FABs in other spots. Now, we had another strike last night right out in the west of this, in the Lviv Oblast. So there are missiles coming out here, and there were reports that a missile for about 30 seconds entered Polish airspace as well. And if that was engaged, that would be completely fair enough. It's entered your airspace, engage it, whatever it is. Now, this is said to be at this stereo here, and this shows that something has been targeted here. You can see some strikes of missiles against targets here. Now, what actually is this? Well, look, we're not sure. People have said it's infrastructure. What others are saying is out in the west of Ukraine, around here, this is where the massive development of new runways, airports have been for the F-16s. We know that the F-16s are built to fly on a lot better runways than some areas will have on the front line. They're a very fussy plane. This is why some people have said an F-18, because of the carrier landing gear, may have been a better option. This is the difference we see between a lot of Soviet-era planes and Western planes. Soviet-era runways, they're sort of built to be, well, the planes are built to be more tough on those. You see, like at the top of the intakes, they can close the underbody air intakes. I believe a MiG-29 open like the fins on top because the runway may be dirty or damaged or whatever. Same with things like parachutes, whatever. There's a lot of examples of this. Then it may affect, how good then the plane is in the air. But at the same time, we know there's going to have to be huge development of systems in place for these too. You're not going to be able to hide a new runway and new hangars and everything. So people are saying what is being targeted here is infrastructure build up to that. I can't prove that at all. That is just pure speculation. That may not be what it is, but expect to see that at some point because it's going to be a very, very big target and a high priority target for them to try, for them being the Russians, to try and hit. Now, we've also seen a number of strikes then go out from Ukraine into occupied Crimea, mainly in Sevastopol overnight. Now, there have been hits and there have not been hits. Now, this was happening when I was going to bed. People were reporting there's storm shadows going into Crimea, and that there's hits and that 2 ships have been sunk. Now, this is what came out from Ukraine's Stratcom official channel. Defense, blah, 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 hit large amphibious ships, the Yamal and Azov, and the communication center, as well as several infrastructure facilities in temporarily occupied Sevastopol. And from this, then every dick and his dog, official, not official, started claiming that these ships were then hit, these landing craft ships. And everyone was claiming that then these have been sunk, destroyed, that there's no landing ships left in the Black Sea Fleet. Now, some satellite footage has come out that tells a very different story to this. But what I want to say first is, why target landing ships? If there's no threat of landings, why attack landing ships? Because I believe there is a threat of landings, I think, and Ukraine, there's other ships to hit in here that I think that they're still concerned, and I would be too, about Odessa. Now, an amphibious landing here would be a bloody bloodbath. But we do see that a landing ship, if there's no thought of landing, is useless. You're way better off going after other targets. But I think that this is evidence that maybe Russia will attempt, and maybe Ukraine think there may be a real threat of Russia trying to then push onto Odessa. That's why I think we've seen primarily the Black Sea Fleet landing ships targeted, because they're not the most high priority target in there. They're older ships. They're cheaper ships than some in there, and I guess they're big and slow, but that's just my 2 cents. But here we have then satellite footage from today showing these 2 ships with no visible damage. If we see this zoom in is this one, no visible damage to the ship, and they're definitely not sunk. But we do see a little bit of damage near these ships that may have had them miss. So we see, this is a bit difficult because it's across here. We see in this dry dock, does look like something has hit here, unsure. And again, on this dock, it does look then like there has been a hit next to the ship here. Now, Russian channels are saying that this is just effective electronic warfare that has caused these to slightly go off their mark. So again, not sure, but like with everything, and I thought this in bed, wait for the footage. There's mobile phones everywhere. There are drones everywhere. There are security cameras everywhere. If something's hit, it will come out. Think of how quiet the Su-34s have been since the claims. Now, we do have some claims here as well. So this bloke here talks about successfully hit the Yamal and Azov. This must have been last night. I don't think I'm going to post this today, but it's still up. Hit the communication center. We will talk about that as it was hit. But it's also said that 3 Su-27 planes were damaged in an airfield in Crimea too. Fighter bomber has not said anything about this. He has a very good reputation when it comes to losses, as well as there's no footage come out yet of these Su-27s and or these ships being destroyed. So question things. You're not wrong to question things. I've had people go, you're the sort of bloke who just doesn't trust anyone. I'm like, I don't trust anyone in a time when every single person has a smartphone, and everything in this war, within a few days, if it has been hit, photos and videos come out. I don't trust anyone for the first 24 hours until they can back it up with something. Now, we do then see an effective hit by one of these missiles against the Russian communications and control center in Crimea. So we do see a large then hit here with maybe a secondary or maybe a second hit. So you can see the violence of these attacks against the center, and we'll show you photographs of the damage made there. But then we will see one of these actually get engaged by air defense as well, as far as I'm aware. We see it just here. So we see another hit somewhere. And then there. To me, this has been hit successfully with AD. So that first flash we may have seen out over here may have been air defense going up. Probably not. That's probably a hit. And then we see then I think a successful strike against that. Not 100% sure. So, yeah, but that first hit is the Communications Control Center for naval assets down here. So you can see it all burnt out here. And then there is satellite footage as well of this between 21st and then the 24th. You can see the hole through the roof and then the damage caused. So a hell of a lot going on. Now, what we do have to do now is then have a look at the maps, as there is a lot happening and a lot of ground being made when we put into perspective of how little ground is actually made day to day and or month to month. As we know, 2023 had a net zero change of ground, with both Ukraine and Russia launching offensive campaigns in this time. Now, where we need to go to first is up into, actually, we'll just come up just north of Bakhmut, as there has been a change here up in the Kremenar Forest. So we'll go back a couple of days. We just see a small bit of ground made here by the Russian forces on then the Ministry of Defense map. Let me show you where we are. We're out here. This is Ukraine, the capital of Kyiv. You know my usual jargon. Now, we come down into Bakhmut. We need to go back to, I believe, the 21st. Now, Russia's goal in here is to get Ivanovsky and then launch further into Chasiv Yar. We know things like the FABs are still having a major effect on these areas. Now, let's roll through the days. From the 21st to the 22nd, we see an expansion of grey zone. And we see not much the 23rd. We do see a movement straight out of Kromove. This was the road of life. This was the secondary road of life at one point. So we do see a large movement out towards then Chasiv Yar, and then to the 25th, we see not that much of a shift, but we do see that things in here are moving. Now, of course, some maps tell different stories. So, of course, this is the MOD map here. People have questioned, why do I call it that? Well, Deep State came under the Ukrainian MOD. So, in my opinion, yeah, it's going to now be less subjective than it was, I guess, before. But let's have a look. Now, we're not going to read all of these because we will then roll through the days. But these do line up with what we did see on the maps. You can see that this is Ivanovsky down here. This road is running through here. And this push out then along the fields here. That situated west of Bakhmut after the resumption of offensive operations. This axis, Russian army has made new advances to west of Popovsky area and managed to capture part of the trench system in this direction. Ukrainian army withdrew to the rest of the trench system located on the hill, which overlooks the town of Ivanovsky. Important to note that the loss of the rest of the hill range will make Ukrainian forces hold the remaining parts of Ivanovsky and will had to retreat towards a water channel, leaving the micro-district east of Chasiv Yar very exposed from the south. We do know that there are some hills in here, some rolling hills, but then they does flatten out near Chasiv Yar. That's why Bakhmut could hold for so long under so many attacks. Other rolling hills that is very good for the defense of Bakhmut in here for artillery and mortars. And then the same day, we had another update on Bakhmut, but this isn't shown then on the MOD map, but it says situation South Bakhmut. Well, the month of fighting was necessary. Russian army take control over this station and land east of the ponds of battles on the Klishkivka axis remain positional, slow, and costly for both sides. So pushing down around Klishkivka, we do know that this is a hell of a lot of very difficult fighting in here, but we're not getting any movement on this map. We like when the maps then further line up. Now, let's have a look further here. So we can see this is the road through Kromove. This is the road through Ivanovsky, and we see a major shift here. This shift on day 759 lines up with the shifts that we saw on the MOD map. Of course, this one shows a larger amount of control out through Ivanovsky here. Situation west and north of Bakhmut. After 1 month of combats, Russian army took full control over the town of Ivanovsky. The capture part of the Baba mountain forced Ukrainian army to retreat into the rest of the mountain complex and the surrounding hills and forests. On the other hand, Russian forces advanced along the road between Bakhmut and Chasiv Yar, and the railway taking control of several positions and reaching the trench system protecting the micro-district. It could be said that Russian troops are now 1.4 kilometers from there. So we see from 57 here to 59, the large changes in here. Now, what we do know is these maps don't line up, but what we also know is we do know that there's been large movements in here, so it's probably somewhere then between the two. Now, he then talks about the capture of Ivanovsky. So this area, of course, we're going to talk Chasiv Yar, but is a turning point on the front south and west of Bakhmut. Remember that Ukrainian offensive last summer succeeded in recapturing a large part of the positions east of the canal, including the high ground between Ivanovsky and Klishkivka. and allowed the recapture of Klishkivka and Rivka and the railroad, which served as a natural border until autumn, when after heavy Ukrainian attrition, Russian forces seized the initiative in recapturing several areas west of the railroad and resumed advance to Ivanovsky. While on the latter axis, the Russian army has been remarkably successful in the south, it has been unable to recapture the lost canal area, suffering heavy losses at the cost of small gains. The reason for this lies in the earlier loss of the high ground, which allows Ukrainian troops to have an advantage in monitoring Russian troops in the area and being able to repel attacks effectively. So this, of course, the green, all this recaptured territory in here and the hills through these areas, allowing to look down in here and also have guns defilade. Now we have one or two more updates here. This is what he sees as the next steps. So the capture of Ivanovsky meant the possibility of taking high ground and trench systems. One, while the capture of Mount Baba would allow Russian forces to reach the canal. Number two, after the loss of the heights, Ukrainian army would be forced to withdraw from Klishkivka and the eastern bank of the canal. As a result, the canal would become a natural barrier reinforced by trenches in the western bank. So a full withdrawal somewhere down through then the canals and a movement back through into Chasiv Yar. But we are unsure exactly how all this will then look. We know that there are pushes out near Bodanivka as well. So this is the canal that we are talking about through here as a natural barrier as well. And this is similar to what we're seeing down in Avdiivka, where there are natural barriers mixed then with defensive works. Now, we'll have the last update on this. This was just today from Bakhmut, down near Klishkivka. You can see then this is the railroad that runs through here. We've been covering a couple of days. But situations west and south of Bakhmut, Russia began advancing south of Ivanovsky after the capture of the town. In addition, troops restarted advances north of Klishkivka. So said there is more ground being taken out around here. It's lining up, I guess, if you were to cross through there, but we're just not 100% sure how this actually then looks on the ground yet. But we do need to go down. There's been a lot of changes everywhere. We need to come into Avdiivka, as we have seen some major shifts on the map through these areas as well. So last time I spoke to you was when we saw that Olivka came then under control. So let's have a look. So we see the 21st, 22nd, the push out from Olivka. 23rd, we then see a major push straight out through Tolnenki. Tolnenki's come fully under control out from Severne there as well. And then right up to Semenivka in Badachi, as well as a push to close off the gaps here. And then between yesterday, today, no real shift. So if we go back, we can then see that the ground being made between the different separate days here. And these are large advancements for what we've seen over the past few years. And of course, through the success in Avdiivka, right up into the lines of defense on these axes. And we do have some other changes also we need to show you on the map just further to the south, but let's talk about this. So 758, we start seeing the same changes in and around here. Now, it is difficult to line up these maps, but dot here, this is Tolnenki, this is Lastachinki, this is Olivka, and then up here, Badachi and Stepove, just to get this line up. And this is showing about what we saw on that day. The Russian army increased the buffer zone around Tolnenki from west and northwest. This map shows exactly that. What we do know is the Russians are trying to get this away from Avdiivka and push into the lines, while Ukraine may not have the lines developed yet in these axes that they then want. Now, these line up as well. This is Semenivka. You can see here, dot Badachi as well. This is Olivka. So you can see a further push has come in. Again, this lines up with, because this was then the next day, lines up with the next day we saw on the deep state. Of course, this push out from Tolnenki in here, this is all lining up. Continue advancing west of Tolnenki. And then the third final update here, we see out from, then we have Olivka, Tolnenki, this closing of the gap here, which is simulated exactly on this map. Shows just this is what we like when things line up. The capture of this locality allowed troops to move through the plantations east of this. Talked about some weeks ago in the northern part of Pervomaysky, where Russian army is resisting fiercely. No. and the northern part of Pervomaiski, where the Ukrainian army is resisting fiercely. In addition, Russian forces got fire control over the roads heading to Semenivka. So said that they've now got fire control on these roads here. I believe that it's very, very close. And what they're trying to do, close this gap, and of course, then push through and have more control over their advancement in Pervomaiski. Now, we'll just come down to, we have seen some changes in the map, especially around Novomyalivka, and let's go back a couple of days. We do see, so you can see what I'm talking about up here for Pervomaiski, but this purple, of course, is where they have held since 2014, and we do see an expansion of control just there as well as a expansion of grey zone between Pobeda and Mariinka just out there. But we see Novomyalivka. Now, we've spoken for about a week that likely Novomyalivka, that this up here is closed off. That's what Surak has been saying, and we've just been looking at the maps going, well, where we're seeing geolocations, that's likely happened. This map has then updated then today, and we see, how do I bring this up? We see a major advancement, at least then shown on this map, that more than half of Novomyalivka has come then under Russian control, and the grey zone through, say, 75%. So that is a large shift in here. We don't see anything around Ugledar region, although we know that's very important. Now, come down to Urazani, we have a look, we just see a change then just over, whoop, where'd my map go? Just there, we can see that change. And we do have then this then lining up on the map here from Surak as well. So we know 100% there was a chain there. Russian army made small advances northwest of Starmailsky. So this is what we like, when maps actually then line up. Now we need to come down into Robotny, as we have seen then this shift in here. Now what we've spoken about, what Surak is showing, is Surak has shown that Russia has regained the defensive works that sit in here between Naporivka and Verbovi, the Surovikin line, that they were desperate to then get this back. Now, what we had talked about is we hadn't seen the MOD map here actually then display any changes in here for a long time, except for this little bit here. Now, what we do see is just a very small advancement here. So maybe that's showing something, maybe it's correction, maybe it will catch up. We're not sure. We're exactly not sure where that is sitting. But again, we like when things add up, evidence, geolocations. That's what we're about in this. We're about what actually is happening and what the effects of information on people actually is. But I wish I had the opposite. When I went away, nothing happened, because then I'd be like, great, I won't do anything. This is probably the worst thing about being in a job like this, is when horrific shit happens, it gives you content, and that's how you make money. But I'd give all of that up so people would stop bloody dying. It is a terrible, terrible thing. But hopefully we can get to the truth somewhat, and you and I will continue trying to be unbiased and give you the actual truth as we see it. We try our best. But Legends, thank you for all your support. Sorry I was away for a couple of days, but sometimes I just need, some time off and to enjoy other parts of then doing this too. But thanks for everything. If you'd like to support me, there's links below, but never feel obliged. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.